But the giant apes were not the only social primates on the island. Excavations discovered that miraculously, about 3,000 years ago, a highly developed civilization had established itself.
The island was once populated by a very sophisticated and advanced race of people, maybe around the level of, let's say, the Inca.
It would have been a civilization sort of on a par with ancient Egypt or the Hittites or Sumerians.
It was a major civilization that had its own architecture and its own style, with a spiritual background.
What we do know is that they were heavily into human sacrifice, that there was a cult of the dead.
The ancient race from Skull Island had revered their dead and had kept their skulls and put them on display as part of their religion, I guess. And underground they had great catacombs and stacks of skeletal body parts.
Most of the buildings of Skull Island have perished and been overgrown by the jungle, but the ones that survived showed that they had a very sophisticated building method.
They built large temples, huge stone structures.
The building styles mirror, say, Nan Madol up in Micronesia, where you've got these structures, sort of walled compounds, in effect, made from crystal basalt logs.
Basalt geometric rods of stone, maybe 2 to 3 meters long. And the great benefit of these was they'd almost work like pickup sticks. They had the ability to sort of weave them into each other to be able to build much more extroverted structures in their architecture.
The ancient race constructed a city on the highest part of the island. This acropolis was surrounded by a massive wall that was once 24 miles in diameter.
When it was originally built, it was to protect the ancient civilization from all of the things that might threaten it, which would include dinosaurs and huge gorillas and various other things.
We can see from the shape of the wall that it would have really been very, very extensive, which suggests there was a huge city there.
But the ancient civilization was doomed. Just over 1,000 years ago, Skull Island's routine earthquakes intensified with disastrous consequences.
The earthquakes began to erode the island, and the island began to sink.
This very big piece of landmass has been progressively dropping into the sea, and now all we're left with is the very tip of this landmass that's jutting out as an island.
So all of the creatures who once survived in a much bigger piece of land have now been shunted into the middle as the island sinks and the coast comes in.
The predators were packed into a much smaller territory with a large reduction in available food biomass.
So there's a great deal more conflict on the island than you typically see around the world in various natural unaffected ecosystems.
The whole place is falling to bits, the ecosystem's falling to bits. Maybe that's why there's too many predators on the island, because, you know, there's just not enough room for everything to live.
The carnivores naturally looked to a new food supply, the humans of the city. And the humans' only protection failed as the earthquakes continued to wreak havoc on the massive wall.
The walls began to collapse, allowing the animals, the giant creatures, into the inner sanctum of the city.
And the humans simply lost. I mean, the humans were the weakest of the species and they were killed off.
They might have actually left the island. They might have taken off and settled somewhere else. We're not sure. We might even be descended from them ourselves.
All that exists of this incredible race of humans are the old ruins, the wall and some of the temples and things that you see on the interior of the island, overgrown.
But the story of humans living on Skull Island was not yet over. When the island was discovered by the Western world in the 1930s, they found a small group of desperate souls eking out the barest existence possible.
The current inhabitants of Skull Island are probably the descendants of people who were shipwrecked on the island.
A race of islanders, a sort of a Melanesian, Micronesian society.
They're very much a hunter-gatherer people. It looks like that is part of their historical culture.
Their only clothing is the hair that they grow on their heads. All of their clothing is knotted out of their own human hair. They have lost the primitive techniques of weaving and only can use crude knotting to create these garments.
They're scavengers. They basically live on birds' eggs, fish, crustaceans.
They have managed to survive clinging to this tiny fragment of land.
And the only thing that was protecting them from the dinosaurs, the monsters, the things that would kill them was this wall, you know. And so this great big ancient wall which went out of the sea on one side, across this peninsula on the island and into the sea on the other side. And so they were confined to a very small part of the island. Beyond the wall is all lush jungle, tropical rainforest, but on their side of the wall, it's been picked clean.
There's no greenery left. It's just this crude, hard rock forms that they live in amongst.
It's not easy.
To see mankind reduced to such a state, rodent-like, fearful and small, is humbling. Man is no hunter here, he is prey. Fall Expedition, 1935. In an intriguing parallel with 1st century Jerusalem, the ancient people of Skull Island had buried their dead outside the city's protective wall. Since the modern Skull Islanders lacked any construction materials or skills, the only safe dwelling that they could find was in these ancient tombs, amongst the bones of the long gone.
They're being hunted themselves, so they live as much as possible in the old tombs. It's almost a subterranean existence.
And they have come to worship the giant gorilla as some sort of god, and they practice human sacrifice to appease this giant gorilla.
It is well documented that Kong was trapped and removed from Skull Island by Carl Denham's 1933 expedition. What Denham learned upon his 1935 return was that Kong had been the last of his kind. Megapromatus Kong's extinction resulted from a combination of nature's wrath and the weaponry of modern man. Upon the outbreak of World War II, the scientific expeditions halted. In 1948, as the first post-war expedition was en route, a massive earthquake registering 9.2 on the Richter scale proved to be too forceful for the weakened outcrop of prehistoric wonder. The very geological instability that had produced the thermal vents that enabled the dinosaurs to survive had now led to the island's demise. Much like the legendary lands of Atlantis and Lemuria, Skull Island vanished beneath the waves. But unlike those imaginary civilizations, Skull Island was explored by modern man, and many lives were lost in the meeting.